Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I am joined by Jonathan Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
Hello there. And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Damon, how is it May? I don't
know.
understand. It's May 2021.
It's May, and all of a sudden there's a lot of games to play.
Yes.
We were just discussing before we started taping. But of course, that means we are just about a month away from E3 2021, the first E3 that both of these consoles are out in the wild. So it should be a pretty significant one. I think that's as good a time as any to start the old E3 predictions game. I think there's a lot that we know of on the horizon that's expected, and potentially some fun surprises that we could be in store for. Jonathan, let's begin with you. PlayStation 5 at E3 2021. We recently ran a poll on IGN asking IGN fans what their most anticipated PS5 game was, and far and away, the winner was Horizon Forbidden West, beating out even the just around the corner Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Surely, hopefully, we're going to be seeing some more Horizon at E3. What do you think?
There will definitely be, I think, more Horizon on the horizon. I'm sorry, I had to say it. Of course, we're right now in a place where Sony isn't confirmed to be at E3, so my assumption is if we see a PlayStation conference around E3 time, and I think we will, they obviously can really put the spotlight on their first-party stuff. They're going to be able to build it around what they want to if they're still staying adjacent to E3 itself. And so I think Horizon Forbidden West, it's still scheduled to come out in 2021 at some point. We don't have a release month or anything. It is cross-gen, so it feels like one that is still conceivable to come out later this year, even if we haven't seen it quite yet. But they need to really show what's to come with that one. Horizon Zero Dawn was, I think before Ghost of Tsushima came out, the fastest-selling new IP for them of the PS4 generation. It was a massive hit. Aloy has become, I think, a defining sort of PlayStation mascot. She's in Fortnite now. So that, I think, one is where a lot of PlayStation fans are really excited to see what Guerrilla can do, because Horizon was such a leap for them, and then to see what they could do on the PlayStation 5, even with a cross-gen game, I think is a really exciting potential for them.
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I should have clarified at the beginning. Sony is not officially part of E3, as has been the case for the past couple of years, but we do expect them to have some sort of a big event drop right around the same time as E3 in early June. So we're lumping them in with all the rest of the E3 excitement and fun. Now, Jonathan, about a year ago, Sony revealed God of War Ragnarok just with a sort of logo reveal. Could we hope to see something more of an official announcement of that game coming up in about a month or so?
I hope so. We got that single teaser for the God of War sequel that said Ragnarok is coming. It did say 2021. Granted, we've seen next to nothing otherwise, and so I think it's one that a lot of PlayStation players are sort of waiting for it's coming in 2022 actually, which, especially given everything that COVID impacted with game development, wouldn't be a surprise. I think this is definitely one that every PlayStation fan, God of War is, it's safe to say, one of the most acclaimed games of the last generation. Mm-hmm. I think fans will want them to take the time to get this one right and not rush it out the door in any way. I think even if it does get pushed to 2022, we'll probably see some sort of teaser for it. It would be something that would, I think, completely dominate the cycle for that day, probably much of the week whenever, this PlayStation conference likely ends up happening. It's hard to compete with God of War in the room, and I think they'll probably want that as a showstopper either at the beginning or end of a show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think is going on with PSVR?
PSVR is interesting because they've said, they've had this commitment to PlayStation VR. It's backward compatible on PS5 as long as you have a dongle that you could get for free to get the camera to work. But they've announced they're working on the next-gen PSVR, which they refuse to call PSVR 2, but that's what I'm going to call it for now. We know that they're working on that to some extent. They've already shown us the controllers for, which I was actually quite surprised they showed so quickly and so early, given they seem to imply it was a little bit further away. My guess is that's something that we're either looking at in 2022 or maybe 2023, given, what delays may cause. But I wouldn't be surprised if they start to tease what's coming there, because we know that the controllers will use haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers that the DualSense do. They're meant to be much more sophisticated controllers than the decade-old PlayStation Move controllers we're still using for PSVR games. I think there's definitely a potential for a lot of excitement there. especially with how successful Astro's Playroom was with the launch of the PS5. Suddenly, Astro's is a much bigger name, and Astrobot Rescue Mission was sort of the defining PSVR game. It was sort of the reason to get a PSVR headset over maybe other VR headsets. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they start to tease that stuff out, but they're definitely, in the midst of launching a brand new console still. Supply shortages are still a real thing. So I don't think it'll be a major showcase piece, but I wouldn't be shocked if we hear a little bit about it.
Well, of course, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is set to launch right in the middle of E3. That's the next PS5 exclusive. Insomniac also delivered Spider-Man, and they had Miles Morales at launch. Is it too early to start thinking about another Spider-Man game?
I don't think so, given how well received Miles Morales was, not just by us, I say as the person who reviewed it, but I think in general that game was very well praised. We've heard great sales success about it. I think even if it is a short cinematic type of teaser, with that one being a little bit further out, again, letting people know there is a new Spider-Man on the way in the same way that they let us know that a new God of War was on the way with such a simple teaser, I think would be exciting enough, and we're early enough in the generation where a short teaser like that is almost more acceptable than when you're later in the generation and you're kind of just like, well, I just want to see the games. I think right now, if they said whatever this new Spider-Man is coming, there's been post-credit teaser scenes in both the original Spider-Man and Miles Morales that heavily indicate where the story could be going. I think they might want to at least, hint at what's to come for sure.
And as for third-party support on PS5, Deathloop was supposed to be out this month. That's been delayed to later this year. Ghostwire Tokyo is coming up in October. What do you expect to see third-party-wise, maybe in terms of exclusives for PS5 or for PS5 around E3?
I think they'll definitely make up a big part of what PlayStation has to show off. They did for both the summer and September showcases last year for the PlayStation 5. A lot of those games, of course, came out around launch, like The Pathless and Bugsnax and many more. But we have a lot that we don't have answers for, like Ghostwire, as you were mentioning. Deathloop got pushed, so it's possible to see that again. Though at this point, I don't want them to overexpose it too much, and I kind of want to just be able to play that game. But there's stuff like Kena, Bridge of Spirits, which we know is coming in August. That feels like a safe bet to be shown, since this would be a pretty major showcase for a game that the PlayStation audience has really gravitated toward on the indie side. You have stuff like Annapurna's Stray, which was shown off at one of the showcases last year. And then, of course, you have really big third-party games like, obviously, Final Fantasy XVI and what was Project Athia and now is known as Forspoken. Those are really big, exciting, marquee PlayStation, seemingly exclusive games, or at least marketed heavily on the PlayStation side. And with Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade coming out just a couple weeks or days after the E3 period, it feels like Square could potentially have a presence with Sony as well.
So obviously lots of exciting stuff to look forward to with Sony, hopefully in the near future. Ryan, switching gears to Xbox, is it fair to say Xbox has more to prove with this E3 in terms of exclusive content on Series X?
Yeah, I think that's still fair to say. They did show a lot of exclusive content last year at their summer showcase in July, but now it's about delivering on that stuff and actually having those games be excellent, be, not just 7s and 8s, but 9s and 10s. That's what really it's going to be all about to change the narrative for Microsoft as far as the lack of exclusive games, which is a fair narrative to have about them right now, and for really most of the last generation. But there is a lot to look forward to. I think, Damon, it starts. I don't think Halo's the biggest thing. I'll get to that in a minute. Okay. But I think Halo is certainly the most prominent thing heading in. Which, yes, I'm sure we'll get a re-reveal for the Halo Infinite campaign after the disappointing showing last summer. But also remember, they've announced that Halo multiplayer is always a big deal. It's going to be free to play. That was a big announcement, but they haven't actually shown it yet. So I expect we'll get a proper multiplayer reveal of Halo alongside, maybe bookending the conference for all I know, alongside the new campaign demo.
Mm-hmm. And of course, now Microsoft owns Bethesda. So there's that whole lineup of games that Microsoft could reveal. Anything from the Bethesda side that you expect or hope to see at E3?
Yeah, that's where the biggest thing that I alluded to a moment ago, I think bigger than Halo, at least as far as the announcement goes, the anticipation, because Halo has already been announced, it has already been shown. Starfield, that is the ace up Microsoft's sleeve, courtesy of Bethesda. The new Todd Howard game, this is a new Bethesda game. There's just, it's a new intellectual property, which, they've been working on Elder Scrolls and Fallout for decades now. So This is a brand new Todd Howard directed experience from Bethesda Game Studios, a science fiction open RPG. I mean, this definitely is going to be probably the most anticipated new thing coming out of Microsoft's conference. And I'm one of those people. I cannot wait to see what that game actually is.
So I think all we've gotten on that game is a very short little teaser thing at an E3 at least a couple years ago now. What makes you think now's the time to really reveal Starfield?
Well, number one, because it could be out this fall. I mean, it's been in development for a long time. You got to remember, Todd Howard and his team, their last game was Fallout 4 back in 2015. So I believe it's 2015. That is a long time. And we know they've been working on Starfield. They're not working on Elder Scrolls 6, at least not in any sort of meaningful capacity. So this is the game. They've been working on it for a while. As you said, they did just acknowledge that it exists a couple of E3s back. So it's possible it's out this holiday, and it's going to be their big game. I mean, with Fallout, we saw them do everybody kind of knew it was coming, but they didn't officially announce it and show it until just several months before it came out. They showed it at E3 and then released it that fall. So I suspect they may very well follow that same blueprint here. But the other reason I think it's definitely going to be at the show and be a big deal, even if it's not actually out this year, is because the acquisition that happened of Microsoft getting Bethesda, they've got to come out swinging. And there's no bigger game to come out swinging with than a new Todd Howard game.
It's definitely an exciting, tantalizing prospect. There are several games that were already announced for Series X that we're either still waiting on or have been delayed. Hellblade 2, State of Decay 3, Scorn, Bright Memory Infinite. Do you expect to see sort of updates on all these games?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of them. I think Hellblade 2 was announced alongside the console back at the Game Awards 2019. I think it is probably time for the first proper gameplay reveal of that. That should be a big deal from Ninja Theory, because that's the closest thing that we know of in the Microsoft first-party portfolio that sort of is that, for lack of a better term, Sony-style third-person narrative action-adventure game. And it's from a very decorated team, and Hellblade 1 was fantastic. So yeah, I think that's a good candidate to be shown off. Forza Motorsport, which we got a sort of in-engine teaser announcement that, hey, we're doing it, and by the way, it's a reboot. So I think they're clearly rebuilding that from the ground up for next gen. I think we could see that, and then a couple of other ones. Everwild from Rare, which has been sort of at least shown, announced at a couple of different events. That's another one where I think it's probably high time for the proper gameplay reveal. You mentioned State of Decay 3. That was just given a CG teaser at the showcase last year. That should be prime for a full reveal. And the one, I'm not sure if it'll be quite time for this one, but I think if it is, then Avowed from Obsidian. First person, for lack of a better term, Bethesda style. Of course, Obsidian's made plenty of their own big RPGs like Fallout New Vegas. That is the other one. We could get a gameplay demo of that, and that's one of the most highly anticipated of the new first-party Xbox games.
That's right. Now, personally, I was super excited for the reveal of a new Perfect Dark.
Yes.
I think that was at the Game Awards late last year. What are your thoughts, Ryan? Any chance we get a little bit more details on the new Perfect Dark?
My gut tells me it's too early, but it is just a gut, and I don't have any sort of inside info on that. But yeah, given, as you mentioned, the timing, it was only finally announced at the Game Awards, which was, I guess as we record this, the last major gaming event. I doubt we're going to see that one just yet, but I would absolutely be thrilled to be wrong about that.
If I remember correctly, Elden Ring, I believe, was revealed during the last Microsoft press conference at an E3.
E3 2019, yeah.
That's easily one of the most anticipated games for their audience, in spite of the fact that there's been virtually no information released since then. Any chance we get sort of I guess it might be due for a re-reveal even for that this time around, for Elden Ring, that is.
Yeah, that is probably the biggest third-party game that we might see as a pleasant welcome surprise at Microsoft's stage. I mean, you're talking about George R.R. Martin and From Software. That is a heck of a partnership, and yeah, it literally almost every IGN comments section, whether it doesn't even matter what the subject of the article above is. When's Elden Ring? That's usually, it works its way in there somehow. It's almost a meme, but yeah, people remain extremely excited for that, and I think that's got a very high probability of being shown off on Microsoft's E3 stage this year.
We're running short on time. There's a lot more games we could talk about. Ubisoft is going to have a presentation. They'll surely have Far Cry 6, the remake of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. They recently announced a Star Wars game. Could see Beyond Good and Evil 2 again. But there's a couple things that I want to hit on, a couple games I want to hit on before we bounce. Jonathan, I want your thoughts on these from WB, Gotham Knights and Hogwarts Legacy.
WB is an interesting one because we did just get word that there's going to be another DC fandom this year, and that was, I think, probably the biggest single day event that we had last year. That one was really big with the reveals of stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of those games, but in terms of all that stuff, we did see a lot of delays out of WB as well earlier this year, and so I could see them holding back for their own event, maybe doing a teaser here or there. Gotham Knights is probably the one we've seen the most of, so we might get a little bit more of a gameplay trailer or something there as part of a package, but I honestly wouldn't expect a huge blowout from them until Fandom.
Got it. Fandom comes up a little bit later in the summer. It'll be the second year for that. Okay, a quick news hit before we get to last week's poll. We found out today that the Mass Effect Legendary Edition will run 120 frames per second on Series X, but only 60 frames per second on PS5. No reason was given for this, but EA did confirm this. So I'm not personally a big frame rate guy myself. I'm not sure that this really affects my decision on what platform to play on. But Jonathan, what do you think? Is this a blow for Sony? Is this a win for Microsoft?
I mean, my guess is that right now, at least, the audience who has both consoles probably was deciding where they were going to play it already. Definitely, if you happen to own both, and frame rate does matter to you, probably want to go for Xbox. I, like you, Damon, have never really been a huge frame rate person. As long as it runs stably, I'm okay with it. But it's certainly, it's an interesting one that I do wish we had more comment on, because I'm genuinely curious about sort of the tech side of it and why that's happening. But in terms of whether this is a pattern we'll see going forward, I'm really fascinated to know what happens from here, because this is a game that is from last gen. It doesn't have native PS5 and Xbox versions. But yeah, it's, I think every single third-party game from now on is going to get those comparisons, because so much of the lead up to the launch of these consoles was which is the more powerful, which has the better abilities for these things, which SSD is going to allow for the better running games. We're going to be seeing that, I think, play out a lot over the coming months and years.
And Ryan, there's obviously been a lot of older games getting an FPS boost on Series X. What was your reaction to this news about the Mass Effect Legendary Edition?
I mean, it's great to see, because the original expectations set by EA on this was, remember, they announced it for PS4 and Xbox One and PC, of course. They never said that they're going to enhance anything for the new consoles. So I'm glad to see a change of heart there. And I'm really glad to see them take at least some advantage of the inherent horsepower in the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. I'm with you on this one. I mean, if Mass Effect's a role-playing game. Yes, it has plenty of shooter elements. I don't need 120 frames for this. I would much rather have a higher quality visual experience. So yeah, I'm going to be playing on Series X in the 4K 60 frames per second high quality mode.
I am definitely looking forward to revisiting Mass Effect. I haven't played any of those games since they were originally released.
Me too.
I've never played them.
Oh, well, you're in for a treat.
You are.
Real quick, I previously mentioned the poll we ran about most anticipated PS5 games, and as I mentioned, Horizon Forbidden West was the clear winner with the IGN audience. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was number 2, followed by Deathloop, then Kena Bridge of Spirits, and Ghostwire Tokyo. But that one's still a little bit further off. Maybe as we get a little bit closer to spooky season, people will be a little bit more excited for that spooky game. We've got a new poll for you to vote on for next week. We want to know what you think. What unannounced game could first appear at E3 2021? Witcher 4, new Assassin's Creed game, GTA 6. That one might be a long shot, although I know it is highly, highly anticipated. Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we will share the results with you next week. And that just about does it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. We'll be back same time, same place next Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. Thank you to both Ryan and Jonathan. Thank you to Red, working behind the scenes, making this show happen. My name is Damon. We'll see you next week.